Most of us go into adulthood with the dream of becoming a homeowner someday. A lot of us feel the social pressure to become a homeowner. I mean, why would anyone not want to be a homeowner if they could afford to? Surprisingly though, home ownership is on the decline. A recent study by CNBC shows that home ownership rate among millennials is about 8 percentage points lower than it was for Gen X and baby boomers. Also, 64% of millennials say they have at least one regret about buying their current home, in comparison to 45% and 33% for Gen X and baby boomers respectively. This is down to a number of factors, including the key factor that home prices are at the highest levels relative to household income. Another factor is more people are starting to realize that they can't get through life with renting versus ever having to own a home. So in today's video, we will take a look at the key things to consider before buying a home, including a final analysis to see if you're better off renting in the long run. Hello everyone, and welcome back to New Roots Abroad, where we provide you with tips, information, and insights that can help you flourish in your life in the US, UK, or Canada, especially if you're new to the country or plan to relocate to these countries. For more great content on thriving in your professional career, personal finance, education, immigration, and settling in your new domicile, please subscribe to the channel. Owning a home is the biggest purchase most of us will ever have to make. The process can be stressful both financially and emotionally, especially in the case of families looking to buy, as both partners need to agree on a number of factors such as neighborhood, budget, size of the house, and so on. In this video, we've listed a number of key factors to consider before you go ahead to buy a home. Firstly, you shouldn't be looking to buy a house if you have a poor credit score. This is primarily due to the impact it will have on your mortgage rates, and this is even assuming you find a bank or mortgage broker willing to give you a mortgage. Depending on how bad your credit score is, you might want to work on building your credit score and getting your finances more under control before proceeding with buying a home. You can watch our video explaining the factors affecting your credit score and how you can work on increasing your score. We will leave a link to the video in the description below. Number 2, if you have a lot of existing high interest debt, it might be best to get them paid off before taking on additional debt. High interest debt will include credit card debts, personal loans or car loans with higher than average rates. If you are unable to pay these high interest debts off, you could also consider consolidating them into a single debt position with lower interest rates. Number 3. This one's pretty obvious. Do you have the minimum down payment saved to match the house budget? Depending on the house price, the minimum down payment can vary from 5 to 20%. In any case, it's advisable, if you can, to make the 20% down payment to avoid private mortgage insurance, also known as PMI. This is specifically in the US and Canadian markets. Mortgage insurance is mandatory home insurance that's taken against the mortgage if the down payment is less than 20%. Borrowers who are not able to make a down payment of at least 20% are viewed by lenders as high risk. Mortgage insurance enables these borrowers to qualify for a conventional loan by insuring the lender against potential losses in the event a borrower is not able to repay the loan. Mortgage insurance adds to your overall mortgage amount, and this can be in the tens of thousands, so something to avoid if you can. The fourth thing to consider is, will getting a mortgage leave you house poor? Being house poor simply means a large percentage of your income goes into paying your mortgage and other house-related expenses that you barely have nothing left for you to spend. This is sometimes referred to as house-rich, cash poor. It is more common than you would think, and it can be a source of anxiety, frustration, and despair. A good rule of thumb is to resist maxing out your pre-approved mortgage amount. If you are pre-approved for $500,000, for example, you can decide to look for houses in the $400,000 to $450,000 range. Banks typically don't care if you are house poor. They just want your mortgage amount to be as high as possible, subject to your risk profile. The higher your mortgage amount, the more interest you pay, and the more money the bank makes. So the onus is on the borrowers to ensure we don't become house poor. A better exercise will be using a mortgage calculator to get a view of all the costs of home ownership. This sometimes seems like common sense, but a recent poll shows that about 20% of millennials go into home ownership underestimating the full cost implication. It's absolutely important you have a good view of the all-in costs and you compare this against your post-tax income. A good rule of thumb is to ensure the cost of ownership does not exceed 35% of your post-tax income. We concede this is sometimes not easy to accomplish, especially in markets like New York, London, Toronto with sky-high real estate prices, but hey, at least you go in with your eyes wide open. Finally, if you plan on moving states or country in the next 5 years, it might be best to stay away from making any home purchases. Research has shown that home buyers would need to stay about 5 years on average in a new home before selling in order to have built enough equity to make the profit of selling. So if there's a good chance you will move in the next 5 years or so, you should generally hold off making any home purchases. In addition to these 5 factors, sometimes it might just make more financial sense to rent, especially in areas with a hot real estate market. So let's take the example of Kwame. Kwame lives in Toronto and is thinking of buying a place. He has an excellent credit score, no debt at the moment. He doesn't have a 20% down payment though, so he will need to get mortgage insurance. Based on Kwame's income level, he is pre-approved for a mortgage of $900,000, which is right on the mark for freehold townhouses in the GTA area. Kwame has his eyes set on a property that costs $866K and proceeds to run an analysis comparing renting versus buying for the same property. We assume an average mortgage rate of 5.8% for the life of the mortgage. This is actually based on average rates for the last 20 years. While rates are currently low, we know they will increase at some point as economies recover. So let's compare the cost of renting versus the cost of buying. We're excluding utility costs because we would expect this to be the same if you're renting versus if you're buying. So we've got renting costs at $2,800 versus an all-in cost of $6,275 for home ownership. Notice that home ownership costs include property tax and home maintenance at an annual cost of 1% of the home value. The difference in terms of cost between renting and buying the exact same property comes to $3,475. So which scenario would make more financial sense? Scenario 1, where Kwame rents and consistently invests the difference of $3,475, versus scenario 2, where Kwame buys a home and builds home equity. Let's find out. Scenario 1, where Kwame chooses to rent and invest the cost difference of $3,475 every month, assuming a 10% annual return, will give these returns over a 20-year period. We see that the returns grow exponentially over the years due to compounded growth. Scenario 2, where Kwame chooses home ownership, we calculate the total equity value by subtracting the mortgage balance from the current home value. In determining the current home value, we used a 45% growth rate every 5 years, which is in line with the average growth across the GTA area in the last 20 years. So comparing scenario 1 and 2 over similar time periods, it shows that early on, home ownership pays off. But over an extended period of time, as you approach the 15-year mark, renting and investing the cost difference produces better returns. In year 20, renting will have produced better returns of about $936,000 in comparison to home ownership. Now, there are a couple of things to consider. In scenario 1, it takes a lot of discipline and willpower to consistently invest the cost difference. This problem doesn't exist with home ownership, as generally speaking, you always have to make your mortgage payments. Second thing to consider is that growth in home value in the GTA area is pretty high. This isn't always the case. So if you're considering home ownership in a community that doesn't see this type of growth, then renting and investing the cost difference would pay off earlier than the 15-year mark. Overall, most people will be better off just taking a home ownership route, because even though scenario 1 makes more sense in the long run, it takes a lot of discipline to invest the cost difference every single month. Missing even a single month of investing will impact your overall returns. Finally, the point of this analysis was just to show that home ownership is not the only way to build wealth long term. So, as you start to ponder on buying a home, you might want to consider taking out this analysis of renting versus buying to figure out what works best for you. Okay, thank you for sticking around thus far, and we hope you found the video helpful. Remember, we are a group of individuals who pool our significant, decades-old experience of living and working abroad to create this content. If you want specific advice or you have follow-up questions or comments, feel free to reach us through the comment sections. Also, don't forget to like and share. See you next time.